Um, oh, very good. Look, we might make a start. Good morning again, everyone, and thanks for joining us, particularly at relatively short notice. Apologies for that, but we wanted to get something in before everyone took off on Christmas holidays and school holidays and things. So, look, thanks for making the time to listen in. A couple of things before we start. Firstly, the webinar is being recorded and it'll be posted on the GBRF website sometime early next week. You'll have noticed, of course, that you're all muted, and we ask that any questions you need to send through through the Q&A function. So there are two, you'll notice on Zoom, there are two different functions. There is a chat function and there's a separate Q&A function. So if you just have a question around the technology or something like that, then feel free to send that through in the chat. But if it's a question about the substance of the call, then please send it through as a question under that Q&A heading, and we'll deal with them towards the end of the session. Given the very large number of people that we have online, it's not feasible to have you patching in and asking your questions directly. So for better or worse, mine will be the only voice that you get to hear for the session. So yes, all questions need to be written down and sent through. We'll also type up the questions and the answers, and they'll be posted on the website, along with any other questions that come through over the course of the call period. Any of those questions will be sort of de-identified and then posted. So look, we'll get underway. Hopefully not too much material to cover, and hopefully it's straightforward, but we'll see how we go with that. My name's Robert Speed, for those of you who haven't met me, and I lead the water quality work at Great Barrier Reef Foundation as part of the Reef Trust Partnership. And so we're here, of course, today to talk about the Innovation and System Change grant round that has just opened. Just very quickly, by way of background, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, that the grant round forms part of the Reef Trust Partnership, which of course is an agreement between the Australian Government and the Great Barrier Reef Foundation, through which there's about $440 million being invested over a 6-year period, with the objective of achieving significant measurable improvement in the health of the reef, and that's focused around improved management, protection and management of key threats. So they're the overarching objectives and outcomes for the whole of the Reef Trust Partnership. Within the Reef Trust Partnership, again, as I'm sure you're all aware, there's about $201 million which has been allocated for water quality improvement. The purpose of that water quality component of the Reef Trust Partnership is to, as I've got there on the screen, to address water quality improvement targets impacting the reef through activities such as improved farming practices, efficient fertiliser use, uptake of new technologies and improved land management practices. The idea is, well, the intention is to build on and accelerate existing efforts, and the water quality work is very much guided by and focused on achieving the outcomes in the Reef 2050 plan, and more specifically the Reef 2050 Water Quality Improvement Plan. The $201 million has been apportioned across a number of different work streams. You will see in the partnership's annual work plan, which is available on the website, how that funding has been allocated. There is $20 million has already been committed as part of an round of early investments that went out earlier this year. There is $20 million that has been allocated for traditional owner-led water quality improvement activities as part of a commitment by the partnership and the foundation to commit 10% of funding across all the streams towards traditional owner-led activities. There's $10 million set aside for conservation and protection in less disturbed catchments. The lion's share of the funding, around $141 million, has been allocated at a regional scale and will be implemented through a series of regional programs. Some of you will have seen that we launched about 6 weeks ago the first of those 2 programs, one in Mackay Whitsunday, one in the Fitzroy, each for about $20 million. And there will be another 3 that will launch on Monday. And all told, there'll be 7 or 8 regional programs which will be focused on 1 or more target pollutants. So in the Fitzroy, there's $20 million focused on addressing sediment, and that'll be managed by a local program manager, and a local plan will be developed for how that funding is allocated. Today, though, obviously we're talking about the innovation and systems change aspect of the water quality component. So there has been $10 million set aside for innovation and system change. And obviously we've issued this expression of interest to identify projects and opportunities that we would look to fund out of that will contribute towards these broader objectives of the Reef Trust Partnership and the water quality component, but some specific objectives with respect to innovation and system change. And you'll see set out there on the slide and also in the guidelines broadly what we are looking to achieve through this work, and that is to establish new practices, new tools, new approaches, I guess new ways of going about farming and land management and stewardship that ultimately will lead to better water quality outcomes. We're looking for new systems to be in place that help us as investors make decisions, help government make decisions, help agronomists, help landholders and others make better decisions around how they implement change or undertake activities that will have water quality benefits. And then finally, we're also looking to secure new funding sources. We're looking to identify and to increase the ways that we can get more funding into water quality improvement activities beyond the traditional government grant system. So there are 4 thematic areas that were identified initially in the annual work plan and then are set out in the guidelines that you have. I'd note that there's obviously potential for overlap between these areas, and so far as proposals go, you don't need to fit clearly within one or the other. It's certainly we're certainly open to proposals and projects that would cut across a number of these themes. That's completely fine. So the 4 themes, the first is around technology transformation, and this is, I guess, probably the more traditional type of innovation call, and so this is simply new approaches for improving water quality. So it could be a new type of technology, it could be a new practice, a new farming practice, a new way of doing business. Obviously, we're particularly interested in approaches that are going to deal with the most critical needs and those areas where there are the greatest constraints on achieving water quality outcomes. And I'll talk a little more about that when we come to the assessment criteria. The second of the themes is around data management. So we've termed it there sharing and management of industry and landholder-owned data. The context to this theme is, I guess, we have identified, and as have many others, that there is a large amount of data that is collected with respect to land use management, whether that's, particularly landholder-owned data, so the data that farmers or others might have around their practices, their soil types, their water application, their yield, these sorts of things, but which can also be held by industry as well. While there's lots of data, it isn't always held in a way that's particularly usable by landholders or by others. And we also recognise as part of this that there is a great deal of sensitivity around data and privacy issues concerned with it, and concerns about data being used in a way that will be detrimental to the landholders and the people who've collected the data. And so the people are understandably nervous about sharing data or putting it into systems where it may be used against them, so to speak. And so we are very interested in supporting and seeing the development of data management systems that allow landholders to, with confidence, place their data into that system in a way that allows them to better utilise the data for their own needs, so that it's more accessible to them. It's they're better able to analyse it and use it in their decision making. But that by having it in a collective database, that it would then allow that sort of information to be aggregated in a de-identified way and then used by others, for example, by investors, to better understand where you might invest funding in a way that's going to have the best outcomes in terms of water quality improvements, but also through that aggregation process to allow landholders to see how their practices and their performance on farm compare with others who might have similar soil types, similar regions, similar approaches. So allowing for benchmarking of by landholders as a way for driving change. So that's I guess some of the thinking that sits behind the second of the themes. What I guess we're interested in is seeing ideas that would promote and support, that type of data sharing and data use. And I guess I'd emphasise that there are really two aspects to that. One is obviously the type of technology that's necessary to allow that to happen, but as or probably more important is the governance around any type of data system, having regard to the privacy concerns and the general nervousness around sharing of data, that there need to be appropriate governance in place to that would engender confidence in data holders, in farmers and other landholders, to actually that they'd have sufficient trust to place their data into that system. That's the second of the themes. The third of the themes we're calling their broad and local scale planning to support future interventions. And so this could be any type of activity that involve planning or mapping or other types of research or investigation that would then be used to support prioritisation for future investments, to help understand what are the most suitable, what are the most cost effective of the different interventions that are available, to work out and then for the actual implementation of on-ground activities, to if it was providing the tools or the support that would allow those who were implementing activities to do them in a more efficient and effective way. So what we're talking about here is generating the tools and generating the information which allows us to invest better and to implement better in this water quality space. And so, examples could be, broad scale mapping of gullies as a way of then allowing either an investor to decide which areas it invest in, or a local, a regional program to better understand exactly where it's going to invest. Tools to support extension providers do their, provide support to landholders in a more efficient way or in a more effective way. These are the sorts of things we're looking for under this third theme. The fourth theme, the final theme then, is around innovative funding and financing. And the objective here is, first and foremost, to increase the potential sources of funding for water quality improvement activities, recognising, as I said, that we want to, broaden the funding base beyond the typical government grant scheme. So this will be looking for initiatives that have the potential to bring in funding from other non-government sources, but also as part of this is the potential to, create the greater incentives, so market-based incentives for water quality improvement. So we would see that as part of the innovative financing theme. If it was generating a mechanism which provided particular drivers, market forces for land managers to change the way they do business in a way that would have water quality benefits. So those are the 4 themes. In summary, there's $10 million total of funding available. We have set lower and upper limits on project size. So a minimum of $100,000 and a maximum of $500,000 for any particular project. Projects are ideally limited to 2 years. The rationale here is that we are looking to invest this $10 million in innovation and system change primarily at the front of the Reef Trust partnership, with a view to any successes that come out of it being incorporated in and rolled out as part of the mainstream water quality program. And so with that in mind, we're looking for shorter term projects generally, but it is not a hard and fast rule, and we are open to projects that have a longer life if that's necessary for the project to work. So we're happy to consider longer projects where necessary. We have not made a decision at this stage as to how much of the $10 million will be committed through this first round. This first grant round, that will be driven certainly by the nature and the number and the quality of the proposals that come in. I do expect, though, that we will retain some funding, some portion of the 10 million, either for further expansion of some of these initial projects, if that proves appropriate, but also for a future funding round. So I would hope that it's likely that in 12 months' time or so that we would look to run another innovation round, but that's as yet undecided, and certainly we're not committed to that. And if we get lots of good projects at this stage, then we won't hold back the funding necessarily. The applications, hopefully the process is relatively clear in the guidelines. Well, hopefully it's completely clear. Certainly let us know if it's not. You can submit more than one expression of interest. And as I touched on before, while we've identified these 4 themes, a proposal can relate to one or more of those. That's completely fine. I touched earlier on the broader water quality program. The intention with the innovation and system change projects is that they obviously can operate as standalone projects, and they can be undertaken in any part of the reef catchment area. But where the opportunity exists, we certainly will look to embed them within the regional programs as those programs are developed. So as I say, from an eligibility perspective, projects could apply anywhere within the reef catchments. That's completely fine. But if you have a project that looks like it would fit well within one of our existing programs, then we're open to that, and certainly we will look for opportunities to do that, including opportunities to coordinate with other projects, larger, more mainstream projects that might be going on the ground. If there's opportunities to link an innovation project or systems change project to those, to identify partners and so on, then we can do that in a later during the design phase. Ineligible activities, these are all pretty straightforward. We don't fund things that have already been done. All on-ground activities need to be within the reef catchments, and obviously no duplication of funding. What can be funded? There are, it's a pretty broad suite of things that can be funded. Probably the 2 things to note here. One is that administrative costs, as a term of our head agreement, for all the activities that we fund, administrative costs can't exceed more than 10% of the total funding. The other item I just note there is there's a bullet there that refers to targeted capital investment items. So we certainly recognise that to implement a project of this type under this sort of innovation and system change theme, that may involve buying capital equipment, where that is central to the, I guess, the nature of the project. So we are open to that within reasonable bounds. So far as the criteria go, there are 3 criteria, and all of those criteria are mandatory. So the first criteria relates to the themes, and there's a sort of a theme-specific assessment. So for the technology transformation theme, we will be looking at the potential cost effectiveness of the new approach. So if you're proposing a new practice, new piece of equipment, whatever that might be, that will have a water quality benefit, how cost effective would that be if it works relative to other existing alternatives? The sustainability of the water quality improvements, is this an approach that's going to be more endurable, more sustaining? The feasibility of the approach, do we think it's really likely to work, and what's its potential to be applied at scale? Is this something that's only going to deal with a small local issue, or is this something that can address challenges that across a large amount of the reef catchment? So that's sort of the assessment criteria 1 for those things that fall within that technology transformation. In the sharing and management of data, we'll be looking at the data governance and the technological platform, including the extent to which the model may establish industry confidence and allow processing and sharing of diverse data, and allow for increased value and services for a broad range of stakeholders. So we're going to want to know, does the approach mean that people will have sufficient confidence to put their data in, and what will we be able to do with that? The planning theme will be assessed based on the extent to which it's filling critical knowledge gaps and supporting the design and implementation of other programs and projects. And of course, we're particularly interested in programs and projects that we'll be needing to implement under the Reef Trust Partnership. And then finally, the criteria as it relates to innovative funding and financing is we looked at as the potential for that approach to unlock additional funding, including through market incentives. So that's criteria 1. Criteria 2 relates to the applicant and their experience and expertise. So we're looking at, we'll obviously be looking at the extent to which the applicant has the experience and expertise to implement the project, and whether they've done that elsewhere, and whether they've got the networks and relationships necessary to deliver the project. And then the final criteria relates to value for money. And in looking at value for money, really, we're looking at what's the cost of the project, how likely is it to be successful, and what's the potential benefit if the project is successful. And obviously, in a sort of an innovation grant round, the risk threshold is higher. We recognise that not everything will work, and that the whole idea of this grant round is to try out some new things, and that there's obviously a potential for failure there, and that's to be expected. But from a value for money perspective, we're obviously looking to trade off, just how expensive is it, and how likely is it and to work, and if it does work, how much of a game changer is that going to be? As far as process goes, so the call for expression of interest has obviously gone out at the beginning of this week. You have until the 21st of February for proposals to be in. We'll do an initial assessment within the 4 weeks of that closing, and that will be initially to identify those that have satisfied all the criteria and which are then moving through to the next stage. And so we will advise people at that point in the process whether or not their idea has sort of shifted, has progressed through to stage 2 or not. For those that have moved through, We'll work out at that time and advise you at that time exactly what the process will look like. It is likely to vary depending on the particular themes. It'll vary depending on the the nature and the number of the applications that come through. Within themes, we expect that there may be clusters of projects that are working on a particular idea or a particular topic, and at that stage we will look at those topics and evaluate how we're best to move forward. And that may be by approaching a number of applicants to put forward detailed proposals on that particular topic. It may be looking or suggesting that a number of applicants come together in a consortium to put together a single proposal, which we'd then look to fund on a particular theme or a particular topic. So that process will be sort of worked through in sort of through late March and April, and ultimately leading to those who've been shortlisted to put forward a more detailed proposal, and then based on that we'll, I guess, make decisions. And certainly the intention is to have projects up and funded by June. To the extent that there are standout applications or ones that stand alone and clearly can be progressed more quickly, then we'd reserve the right and certainly be looking to kick off projects sooner where they can. So we'll be doing them in parallel rather than necessarily as an entire bunch. From a probity perspective, just a few points I'm sure familiar to all of you who've been involved in these sorts of processes. Obviously, it's essential that all applicants have a fair and equitable opportunity to access information. And so as such, we've got a single point of contact. So please email through to the grants email that's there on the website, on the slide. There's also in the guidelines. Send through all questions to that. There's also a phone number there if need be, but ideally send through any questions by email is the easiest way for us to handle them, and we'll reply to those as quickly as we can directly to the person who sends in the question. But we will also then de-identify the question, so both removing the name but also where necessary adjusting the question so it is anonymous, and then we'll post that and the answer on the GERF website. Also just noted there, if you do intend to apply for the grant, please make sure you have registered on tenders.net so that you will get updates there. That's all by way of a presentation. So I'll now ask you, and you can to start typing away. As I said at the beginning, there's a Q&A function that's on Zoom, so please please use that rather than the chat, and we'll work through the questions. So we have a question: will the recording be made available? And yes, I said at the beginning it will be made available on the website. It should be up early next week. We have a question: can proposals include overseas partners? Yes, they can, but the applicant needs to have an ABN. I think that's the primary. That's a key eligibility requirement. But as far as other partners go, then overseas partners is fine. But the contracting entity would need to be need to hold an Australian business number. So at this stage, we don't have any other questions. We'll wait. So I'll take that as a good sign that everything's quite clear. I'll just pause for a moment while everyone types, though. I have a question: are proposals from Cape York eligible? Yes, they are. So the proposals, on-ground work needs to be undertaken in any one of the reef catchments. But so it's not limited to the the high priority areas. Projects can apply in can be undertaken in any of the reef catchments. So there's a question. The GBRF annual plan mentions investigating the potential for optimisation in agricultural supply chains, new markets in reef-friendly products, market-based incentives, and markets for co-benefits. Are these types of activities still of interest? So yes, I'd say that those generally fall under the innovative finance component. So it mentions there bringing market forces to bear to as a way of changing practice and bringing in, I guess, new funding and new investment. So so look, the short answer on that one is yes. We have a question: do proposals require cash contributions? No, they don't. I guess ultimately we are assessing what do we get value for money for what we invest, and if somebody is co-contributing and that means the project will deliver more for the investment that we're making, well then that obviously equates to better value for money, but it's not a mandatory requirement. As I say, we ultimately will be looking at what is it that will be achieved for the investment that we make. What is your seaward boundary? From a water quality perspective, we are primarily focused on dealing with activities on land at source, rather than activities that are trying to mitigate pollutants after they've reached the reef. So we'd, I guess, be looking at the catchments themselves, and to the extent that anything was beyond the catchments, it would be certainly quite limited. We don't have any particular defined boundary though there about what the seaward boundary is. I have a question. Will feedback on the water quality on-ground expression of interest for the Mackay Whitsunday be available for this expression of interest is due, i.e. between 14th of February and the 21st of February? It's possible, but I can't guarantee that. So for those who are aware of the process, we ran a expression of interest. So this applied to both Mackay, Whitsunday and also to Fitzroy. We ran a parallel process, one to appoint program managers for those programs, and secondly to requesting expression of interest for projects, on-ground projects. So the first stage in the process is to appoint the program managers, and we hope to do that this calendar year. But obviously Christmas and so on can create challenges with that. That had left us a month or so, losing the beginning of January to do the initial assessment on the EOIs that came in, and then to start providing feedback. And that's our target date, is around the 14th of February. So we're still certainly aiming to provide some feedback by then, and we're still on track at this stage to do that, but I can't guarantee that will be done. And so you just need to think about what that means for your application for this process. So next question, weeds and feral pigs, I'm assuming that is, operate over Cape York. Can we apply from the Indigenous groups that are in the reef catchments? So look, there's all of those things are certainly within scope, dealing with, to the extent certainly that, say, feral pigs contribute to water quality, then that's something that is in scope. I guess the question is whether the approach is a is seen as an innovative one, and whether it's going to meet those other criteria around things like scalability and so on, how cost effective it's going to be compared with other approaches. So there's it's certainly not ruled out. And so far as Indigenous groups go, well, I guess there's no particular distinction that's made through this innovation round as to which groups are eligible. So look, so the short answer to the question is yes. That sort of project would be eligible. It would just be assessed against the criteria as all others are. So the next question: do projects have to be regionally located, or can they straddle the entire system? Particularly, for example, in regard to theme 2, the data management and sharing. Look, that's completely fine. They don't have to have a particular regional focus, and they can certainly go across multiple areas. There's no problem with that. Next question. In our experience, getting cooperational landholders to share data is not primarily a technological problem. They will not view technology as providing the whole solution to sufficient confidence. So to that part of the comment, I completely agree, and hence our focus on governance and having systems in place that farmers will have confidence in. Do you regard surveying landholders in regards to their reservations and any potential solutions as fitting within the guidelines? Yes, I suppose, would be the short answer, although a survey itself would presumably only be part of developing an actual package. So, I mean, I can see how that would contribute towards establishing a data system. I'm assuming that doesn't necessarily mean it's the full project, though. Yeah. So further question, clarification regarding the weeds and feral animal work. So there's potential under this innovation round to apply for that, and I guess the question's highlighting the fact that it's an Indigenous not-for-profit group. There's some potential here, but I suspect that there are much better avenues under the Reef Trust Partnership to seek funding. I mentioned earlier that there's $20 million has been allocated for traditional owner-led water quality initiatives. And also there is $10 million that's been set aside for protection of and conservation in less disturbed catchments. And certainly we're expecting a significant amount of that $10 million to go towards efforts in Cape York. So I think both of those avenues are more likely to be suitable for a group like yours to seek funding. And look, I'd be very happy if you want to send through an email and to have a conversation separately, independent from the sort of the innovation opportunities, to talk with you or to put you in touch with others to talk about what other opportunities there are. Later. So for the time being, that's all the questions we've got through. I'll just give over another 5 minutes or a few minutes at least. We've got a question looking for an email contact, and look, we've got your details, so we'll email you through directly to have that conversation about the cake. So we don't have anything more coming through. I'll just give it one more minute in case somebody's typing away, but otherwise we'll sign off shortly. So we haven't had any more questions come through. So so I'm going to assume that that's all your questions answered. So, so look, thanks again very much for taking the time and for showing the interest in the program. We're very excited to, and in anticipation at the proposals that we'll see come the new year. In the meantime, please send through any further questions you've got to the grants at Barrier Reef email. And we'll, as I say, we'll post those on the website, and we'll also post this webinar and slides and make them available. So look, thanks again all. Enjoy your Christmas breaks and look forward to catching up with you all in the new year.